So good morning, everybody. I'm Mary Carol Sheffield, and I'm just your facilitator for this. So I'm not going to talk long, but I wanted to introduce Jason Duggin, who is our beef specialist. He is housed at the Gordon County office, and he is responsible for the heifer development program and the herd program, bull evaluation. And he's also one of our beef quality assurance coordinators for Georgia. He does youth livestock programming and he's active like nationwide in that realm. So I'm going to turn it over to him to talk to us about things that we need to know as ag agents about beef programming.
All right. Well, good morning, guys. I don't know why you're not sharing your videos this morning. That's quite the shame that I can't see you, but that's a joke, by the way, particularly for Greg Pitman. But anyway, just going to go over some basic things in terms of some rules that are going to change this year on the live animal programs. We've got the bull test in particular already going on at Calhoun, but going to also have delivery here in a couple of weeks for Tifton. The new rule for that is that all animals that will be sale eligible need to have genomically enhanced EPDs, and they also need to have parentage done on them. So that's a big change. You may have heard some discussions or questions coming to your offices, and that's why I want to bring that up, because of the potential questions that may come to your counties for producers needing to collect samples for that DNA, and maybe some fussing and maybe not so many happy thoughts about it, because it does cost money, particularly for the Simmental and Sim Angus folks. It can cost around $70. So in the Simmental, Sim Angus world, we have lost a lot of numbers at Calhoun and at Tifton. In the past 2 or 3 years ago, we would have had 40 to 50 Sim Angus, or maybe more, including Simmental. We would have had at least 50 total Simmental hybrids. Now we're closer to about 11 total. So we lost a lot of those folks, particularly at Calhoun. So just want to let y'all know about that. And if you do have any questions about those, we do have some. I don't know if you, Mary, can you see the programs page there on a shared screen? Do I have that shared correctly to you all?
Yes, I can see it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you click on Georgia Bull Evaluation Center, you can see the typical stuff that's on there, but we also have like a very general approach to talking about adding genomics as part of the bull test program, and it just goes through every part of that. Now, I would say most of your Angus type producers are very well aware of this and know it very well. They have been on this for a while. Some of your other breeds, not as much. It's just a difference in how the breeds are focused and the population that's out there. I just threw this together, and the biggest thing is just to look at maybe gathering samples. Many of you are familiar with the blood card already. Typically, we draw blood from a tail. To get those samples, it's the easiest. There are some videos on the internet about how to do that. You're welcome to call me one-on-one. We can talk about that. The newest thing, though, is the TSU samples. You can see that there's a link for that, and that comes with a tube. And that tube is basically placed with almost something like an ear tagger, and it collects a solid central hole through the animal's ear, and that's how we would gather the genomic information. You can also do BVD testing. So we're focusing on right now about bull test, and that's where it costs a lot of money. But now we can shift gears really to heifer and roll it all together. So the heifer program, the herd programs, which you guys are more involved with directly, we're also doing a genomic testing portion for sale eligible animals in particular, but all animals. There might be some breeds out there that do not have the ability to genomic test, but we're still asking people that can to do it. So here's the difference between the herd program and the bull test, if you're still awake and following me here. So the bulls, we're asking people to have the sire and dam, quote unquote, qualified. Qualified means that it's highly likely those are the parents, but it is not 100%. It qualifies means that it is a good possibility. So you're ruling out all others is how they look at it in the genomics world. In the herd program, we're not requiring the parentage portion of this. It's only that we're getting the genomically enhanced EPDs for the registered cattle. So if you're still following me, the registered cattle for the herd program, they're going to need to take those samples up front, or we can help them get them at delivery. Do not publicize that a whole lot, but we can. And then we will give the samples right back to them. The problem we get into is a billing and a processing difference with registered animals because they have to go through an association. And the BVD portion of that would be delayed if we did it that way. So at herd delivery, we will do all of the commercial animals and all of the registered animals at one time, but the registered females will only have the BVD done. They will not have the genomics portion done with the samples we get. And one other thing that you do want to note, guys, if you've got producers you work with on the herd program, is that we will have two prices, which is different. The reason being is because of the difference between how registered heifers are processed and how commercial heifers are processed. So the commercial heifers are going to have a higher test fee, if you want to call it that. However, in the end, the registered people will pay more because they're going to do the test themselves, and it will cost them more. It will cost them somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 to $30 additional over what the commercial folks will, just based on how it's all done. At Tifton this year, the test fee is going to be, and that's Lawton Stewart is going to be over the Tifton herd program as an interim until we find a replacement, if we find a replacement during this budget cut. So the test fee down there is going to be close to $630 at Tifton, with everything involved in that. If you see the letters come out, the registered heifers are going to have less to pay, but don't let that confuse people. The registered folks are actually paying more overall in the end. It's just not being billed through us. We can take care of those commercial heifers a lot easier. We can get the BVD test results within 48 hours. And we think that this genomics for the commercial deal will just enhance the program, help us to just learn and get educated about genomics on the commercial level, and hopefully enhance all the way down to your producers there in your counties on just looking at different avenues for tools for selection and hopefully profitability. With regard to genomics on those two programs, any questions, guys? Feel free to hit me up this morning. Greg, if you're still listening, I'm surprised you don't have any questions, man. Y'all must know this is recorded for the whole state.
Jason, this is Roger. Can you hear me?
Yes, Roger.
So, do I understand you correctly that the genomic testing will provide EPDs for the commercial heifers of unknown parentage?
Well, it'll provide them some data points to look at. They're going to be more of an index. So it'll be a ranking of the animals for that given marker. So there'll be a ranking for carcass type traits, and they'll have high index scores, or low index scores, or somewhere in between, but they're not exactly EPDs. It could be thought of as a similar type situation, but it's not the same in terms of how they're calculated and really how you use them. It's more just looking at that animal, and in EPD world, it's more of, you're looking more at the expected progeny in terms of you're relating it to the next generation more so than the actual animal, is how I look at it. But it is an index. So let's say you'll have 3 heifers, and we'll get those genomic results back, and one of them be really high on the terminal traits. One of them could be really high on maternal type traits, a maternal index portion. And there might be one that's kind of a good balance of both those. There'll be some differences like that. But good question.
But if it's a heifer that I'm going to put in the herd, I'm interested in her progeny. So that index, if it's higher, I expect her progeny to be better than average.
Yes.
Is that a reasonable assumption?
It is. And then what I was talking about there, you can't really, it gets a little convoluted, but when we're looking at APDs, we're looking more so from the bull side and how we can compare two animals and the difference between those two. These indexes are just going to give us a comfort level, not actual differences that we can compute and say that we should expect this amount of difference in the progeny. But yes, and generally speaking, yes, what you're saying is dead on.
But Jason, question. So two questions. One is, could you provide us an example of one of these genomic reports, and maybe have another webinar where we go over that report, and so we can understand it of, hey, this is what your producer is going to get, or this is what you're going to get a copy of. This is how you interpret this. That would be.
And what we'll probably do is have these guys come speak at some of our meetings, but it would be good to have it maybe for folks that can't travel or can't get to those meetings and look at those reports.
Yeah, absolutely. And secondly, this would be, if you like, I got a couple of guys that's somewhat interested in the herd program and putting some animals in. So this is a kind of we're getting a little bit of traction here with some local producers, which is good. But if this is really, these genomics testing is even more beneficial, especially if you're doing a closed herd, right? I mean, you're trying to raise your own replacements, and you're trying to start down the genetic lines. I mean, this is, like you said, is going to develop that baseline for sequential generations to come, to start saying, hey, 5 years ago, here was the parentage, and this is this is where we started. It's a starting point, correct?
Yes, and the people that have done it for multiple generations, multiple years rather, they love it, and they think it's awesome. I think that with anything there should be caution, meaning there's always some things that you give up when you start chasing some of these things, but it is a nice, good tool to put in perspective of everything. So the things that genomics don't do is they don't really help us with feet. Some visual things that just aren't really accounted for yet. Yes, they do have some longevity components, but they're not 100% accurate. They can't predict everything, is what I'm getting at. So yes, we can get you some indexes and have them and look at those. I think that's a great point, and something we need to get ahead of the ball game on. And I could even get Clint McWaters, who works for Neogen. We might even be able to get him on something like that, because he works for the company, and or I could talk with him and then just relay it to y'all. That might be about the best, really.
And I'm a novice at this, Jason. I mean, in the world of the beef industry and carcass quality and all the other factors that's measured on the back end of the process, and that I'm not familiar with. But at the end of the day, when we're looking at our average commercial owners, or even if they're registered and have a full registered herd, I mean, at the end of the day, us extension agents, we're selling to them. The more numbers, the more data you can gather on your animals, the better. I mean, you can't, like you said, you can't omit the common sense approach of being able to look at an animal and see how he walks or she walks, and feet and legs and frame. But at the end of the day, it's multiple puzzle pieces that come together. So the more puzzle pieces you can gather, the better decisions that's going to help you. Is that a correct assessment? Is that a correct message to give to our producers?
Yeah, and there's something a little bit tricky, and there's some of this stuff that I've got to learn. It's not all just really easy to understand, because the companies, they know everything, and they can't really share everything because they've got competitors. Neogen's very open about it as best they can be. And what you said is exactly dead on. I really can't repeat it any better than what you said there. But the end of the day, it depends on a little bit on how the producer, how their goals are set. So if somebody's really focusing on some terminal offspring and, they're selling on the grid, which you see very rarely from our state, they can really benefit big time from this kind of stuff. What I like is looking at the maternal portion, keeping females, looking at longevity and things like that, looking at differences. The nutshell version here, guys, is if you had 40 heifers and you really only wanted 20, you might be able to call out some of those that are red flags for various things. It could be tenderness, it could be, docility, but usually you can see that anyway. You're hopefully going to prevent keeping daughters that would waste you money in one form or fashion. You may not be able to see it with your eyes, is how they explain it, or how everybody puts it in these seminars and things. You can't see everything with your eyes, which is true. And so that this tool will help you save money from keeping heifers that you shouldn't have kept, basically. But good questions, guys. Good comments. On just one rehash on the bull test part, on the parentage side of things that we don't have in the herd, people will need to get their cows in their breeds database. They'll need to get their cows sampled. So you have a said bull you want to nominate, they want to nominate, then the dam of that bull would have to be sampled and put through the database. The sire would too, but most of them are AI sired. They would already be in the database. So that should be our sum everything up on the genomics rule. We do have a new herd team contact for the North region. That would be Brenda Jackson, and Greg has done that previously. And so your new herd contact in terms of agent leadership, particularly, would be Brenda out of Murray County, North Georgia. I believe Holly's still doing the southern portion. The cost for these programs this year, just as an FYI, is $840 for bulls in Calhoun. It's going to be $870 for bulls in Tifton. The herd program in Calhoun, we wouldn't have official numbers yet, but I'm just speculating it's going to be around $530 with the new fee for the genomics put in there. It has historically been $480, $490-ish, and then we'll add in $30. So it'll be roughly around $530, maybe $520, but we just don't know just yet until we get our official numbers in.
And I came in a bit late, Jason. Did y'all say y'all were going to do that test, or those tests need to be taken before those cows are entered in?
So the commercial females will be sampled on site for genomics. The registered females, we could assist that producer in terms of helping them get the collection that day, but it would be best, and most probably can do it, go ahead and do it at home for the registered cattle. And it's because of how they're processed differently by the company and the associations. When you get the associations involved, it becomes a different animal, and the BVD testing takes much longer. And it's just, I could go on and on about the differences there, but we're going to do the commercial cattle and the processing and the billing for all that, but the registered folks will do it themselves. Unless
and so that would that still be $530 for the registered, even if they do it themselves?
Correct. So yeah, we talked about that later. There's going to be different billing for commercial versus registered because of that.
Yeah.
So the commercial heifers are going to be more expensive on our bill.
Right.
However, they're actually going to pay more.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. Anything else on that?
This is kind of ignorant, but
nope.
The producers understand if they're producing hybrid animals, which association they should be doing business with. Like Sim Angus goes to Simmental, or
they would typically know that if they're registered folks.
Okay.
They would know that. We could get into a little more finer detail in talking about this. It gets down to population pools. When it comes to the commercial cattle, to put it bluntly, the higher percentage of Angus in these companies, that the more predictability they have, because there's greater numbers of them. When you start getting to animals that don't have any Angus in them, there's specific tests, and we could talk about that for a while, but yes, those folks that are doing registered, they for sure have to go through a specific breed association, and they surely would know that. Most of the time, that's pretty straightforward. At Tifton, the fee is being sent out now for herd. And the other day, it looked like the number was going to be 600. And, that's going to vary again on registered versus commercial in that genomics portion. So you'll see different variations of the cost based on that. We did that more recently on how we were going to bill that, because it gets a little bit complicated. We don't want Grace and them billing everyone differently. It gets a little bit interesting. Georgia Beef Challenge. Last year we would have sent, I don't know if you might not be familiar with Georgia Beef Challenge, please do take some time to read on that one. You could go back to the Beef Animal Programs website and look at Master Cattlemen and all those things, but Georgia Beef Challenge as well. And of course, we just had our meeting the other day. Last year was really, really, really hard in terms of feeding cattle in the northern portion for us, that is in Iowa, western Iowa. Terrible winter for feed conversion. It's bad for cost, bad for gains, bad for carcass quality. They come out okay considering how terrible a long winter they had. We had some death loss. You may, just to be 100% open about all of it, there was some death loss with a couple of loads. We think that we've got some of those things addressed on our end. Trying to implement a new rule. There's a minimum weight of 550 for those. There is some leeway, but we're trying to help people minimize death loss. And there's a long discussion that could ensue about, the validity of a weight requirement and not having an age requirement in there too. But this is just a safeguard to try to help us prevent death loss in those. Last year, we would have shipped a good many head of cattle. We would have shipped around 700 head of cattle and gotten data back for a lot of those folks. The Georgia Beef Challenge is one of those deals that if people have, Hereford cattle, we ship a lot of Hereford cattle because they get hit at the barn real bad. So it's a benefit to them to send those, non-breeding females that they don't want to keep, or the steers. We ship those to Iowa, and they feel like they really get a lot of return on those, plus the data back, the carcass trait data. We would have shipped a load last week that would have been 80% Hereford. From the Herefords come from Northeast Georgia, shipped out of Eatonton, come over to Calhoun, and we would put another 17 head on there. So that's an avenue for some of those folks that have got some breeds that don't do well to local market from a hide color standpoint. They get docked there, but not so much on the rail. Any questions about Georgia Beef Challenge? I know that's very quick and vague.
Jeremy or Jason, I'm probably Jeremy. That's those animals in that system. Those are the bulls that come off of the bull evaluation, correct? Or not necessarily?
The Georgia Beef Challenge?
Yes, sir.
So these are terminal animals that we get from producers that hopefully would weigh over 550 pounds, generally speaking, 650 pounds. These are going to be steers and terminal heifers that will help producers get together groups to make a load. You're looking at roughly 60 head, and those 60 head we put together. We have data on how they've been treated and all those things. They go to Iowa, they stay that 150, 200 days, sometimes less, sometimes more. And
so that's a one-time drop off?
Yes, then they'll go to harvest. I mean, they'll be there at the feed yard in Iowa, one of those family feed yards of the Iowa, what they call the steer carcass fraternity. Interesting name, but basically it's people that have got tons of corn and they have a small feedlot basically, and those cattle will go to kill. The producer gets the carcass data back, and of course they get paid based on how they harvested, their grade and yield, quality and yield grade.
And that's a market price they get for those animals?
Yeah, whatever the grids and whatever the packers are doing at that time. There is some risk management that goes on with the committee, the risk management committee. So Dr. McKissick right now helps with trying to hedge a little bit. He has been, let's say, getting a locked-in price for half the cattle, and then that helps prevent any bottom end drop-offs, but it allows for a little bit of up end, if you will. That's the hillbilly version anyway.
But besides the weight, there's no standard, whether it's commercial, registered animals.
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, it's, if they're terminal animals, they want to feed them out, we'll send them. We do send quite a variety. We've had some bring us folks bring us data back. There'd be purebred producers that wanted information. And lots of times we do see a lot of seed stock folks that do that because they want the carcass information to come back for whatever reason, just to see what their genetics look like, basically. But we also, the committees and the diehard Georgia Beef Challenge folks have been doing this for a couple of decades. They've been doing it for 20 years or more. A lot of those guys, they believe in it. There is some risk with it. I will just tell you that up front. They can die. And that's the risk with Georgia Beef Challenge is they don't all live. And typically speaking, we would say 1%, but however, if you ship 10 and you lose one, that don't seem too good then, does it? That's more like a 90%. But if you're one on a load and we have one die out of the entire load, but your producer has 1 of 10, it's a bigger deal. So that's one thing to be cognizant of. It's a great program, a lot of benefits, a lot of neat things, but there is the risk of mortality. And
well, they die, but they still got paid for them at least.
No, not if they died in a feed yard. Talking about sickness. So we're talking about one of them got sick and died before he got harvested.
So it's better to have your producer who's done all their proper shots and who's doing the proper management. Yeah,
and that's where we could get into. This is good information here that there's no solid answers, which you know that about everything now that you're extension agents. There's no solid answers for anything, right? But you can have great vaccination program and you can still have problems. For example, there was a producer from Wades County. He wasn't there at the time. Had the veterinarian give him all the vaccines. He lost 10 of, they did them rounding numbers here. He lost 10 of 20.
Oh. Because
the genetics of them were different. They were all out of first time heifer calves. Just one of those deals that you cannot explain. His vet gave the vaccines, ships the Georgia Beef Challenge himself. And that's one of those deals where we're, again, trying to get older animals that aren't as naive. Having some age on them and having some weight on them is a beneficial factor, although it is not not bulletproof either. The feed yard deal is a whole different animal. No pun intended.
Jason, what's the calendar on that program?
Well, there's that. It's kind of a work in progress always. We've tried to have certain dates and it just doesn't really work well. So right now we typically ship between now and October. People would need to contact Grace is the best way to do that. Grace down in Tifton, even if you're up in the northern part of the state, she'll help organize those loads, and they usually ship out of Calhoun, Athens, or Eatonton, of course, Tifton. Sometimes if you got enough cattle, they'll ship directly from the farm. We can ship from about anywhere, but just got to have a load and shoot. The Grace she'll get a call and somebody says, I've got 15 I want to ship. Well, then she's got to talk to somebody else that needs 15. And they got to be in the same proximity. We'll have another load go out by the end of September out of Athens, hopefully. So we usually ship 5 or 6 loads, and sometimes more. And then sometimes there are also some from spring loads, but last year we didn't have any spring loads. Probably a good thing too, because it was so nasty up there. Yep. So there's not a set schedule, but just contacting Grace if somebody's got cattle. Just to paint a full picture for you guys. The Georgia Beef Challenge is a great thing, but it is not for everybody. If you've got a producer that's getting new and fresh, they want to learn. Don't have them send all their cattle to Georgia Beef Challenge. No. If they've got 100, they need to ship 10 to 15 to get their feet wet because of the mortality, all the risk that's involved. Those 10 or 15, they may say, that was the best thing I ever did. Well, they'll ship 30 or 40 the next year, that kind of thing. You kind of got to ease into it, understand, get some data and information, learn the ropes. If anybody wants to learn the industry, they can send their cattle through Georgia Beef Challenge and they'll do it. I mean, that'll sure do it.
That's bulls, steers, and heifers, or not heifer cows?
Just steers and heifers. They need to be castrated and healed before they ship. One thing that you're looking at there is when a load goes, there might be heifers on that load. And then when they get there, they're going to stay, relatively speaking, they'll stay within that pen the entire feeding period. So it's not a perfect situation, but it's a way for people in our neck of the woods to get cattle on feed. And it works great. It is a great program. It's not without its natural errors, meaning cattle die. I don't want to scare you to death on that, but I want you to know that it does happen. And so those animals that ship, there's the rules. If you go back in here and you look at this 1920 Georgia Beef Challenge rules and entry forms, it's going to have all of the vaccination protocol and the weaning protocol, as well as the castration update in there that they need to be castrated and healed. They really need to be castrated at weaning or before. And then the rules say 45 days weaned, but the best scenario is 60 days weaned. And that's what most of the industry is going to now on a preconditioned sale is 60 days. And while we're on kind of a sale, if you got people that want to make money, I know you've heard this 1,000 times, most of you, but if you're a new agent, you haven't, your producers need to be trying to do a preconditioned sale if they can find an outlet, depending on where you're at in the state, et cetera. That is the best thing to do. Up in our neck of the woods, we have the red carpet cattlemen's. They ship about 16,000 head and never go through a sale barn. There are some of those loads are commingled loads, meaning you got multiple producers that get cattle and they get them sold and they do quite a good job. There's other barns, of course, Northeast Georgia over in Athens is doing some of that. They've sold a bunch of loads. And your local sale barns might work with your local chapters and do some similar things. I know there's one in middle Georgia as well that has done that.
Jason, what came of that feed out in Reedsville?
Well, that's a totally different animal. They got a neat setup, and I really have yet to see it. But they have the covered feedlot in Reedsville, and then those cattle would generally go to FPL there in Augusta. FPL and they really run that deal at Reedsville. They're very select on what they feed out and what they kill because they have target product. They want to go to target places. They ship a lot up to Northeast, so they want those cattle to grade very well. And they buy very selectively, and they probably don't want to feed a lot, particularly don't want to feed a lot in the summertime. Was that help with your question? You could.
Yeah, I just know that at one time the Union County folks up there were trying to gather a bunch of cattle from local producers to potentially direct market to them, and that's all I heard about it. They were fairly new and Why are we shipping our cattle out west when we need producers? You know, we can save on all this shipping and handling and get better prices and source locally, so forth, that whole concept.
Yeah. Let's see if I can maneuver. Well, there is a meeting for some of these things. Some of you may have seen it already. Maybe you can already see my email there. Let's see here. Let's see. Yeah, so you can see this is something that's going to be September 25th at Bartow County. Of course, there's probably other ones in the state too for you South Georgia folks, but they're going to have a few meetings talking about the feasibility study that some firms did. They're listed at the bottom of that flyer, talking about, can we have a packing plant in Georgia? Another one. There's a lot that we could talk about on that, but a packing plant's one thing, but then you got to have feedlots, and then that's only a part of the story, because then you have a place to go with the hides, a place to go with all the offal. And we just don't have a lot of that locally. And then where are we going to source corn and byproducts? You know, it's a big deal, and they're going to cover some of that. UGA did that feasibility study for those folks at the bottom. That'll be interesting to see what they found out. I got a producer I talked to about once every 2 weeks over the last year and a half talking about this. And I'm telling, well, it's just a big deal. It's just a big deal. And
they need to do that through a webinar too. He needs to set up a camera or something.
What's that now? Oh, do it on webinar?
But yeah, well, no, he needs to webinar that meeting instead of just being in person.
I would say so. I think that's a great point.
I can call Paul and just see what he can do.
Well, that's one way to do it for sure. And if you'd like to do that, that's fine. Or we can all hit him up. He might get the message right. He may not be the one that says yes or no. It might be the gentleman that did that feasibility study. His name escapes me right now, but obviously Paul knows who that is. And surely
it'd be better to come from you.
It doesn't matter. No. Just copy me on it. That way I can get in there and voice. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Because there'll be a lot of folks that can't go there on a Wednesday night anyway at 6:30.
You know, Jason, I'm doing some research for some lamb production as well in my county. Mm-hmm. And I have 2 or 3 people that'd be interested in ramping up if we had somewhere to process the animals in bulk. Yeah. And we don't. I think the closest they found is over in Kentucky. There's apparently a processing place that recently sold over in Noonan, Georgia. And I don't know if they're taking cattle or not as well. But Nikki Whitley from Fort Valley was trying to find the information of who the new owner was. But golly, I know it's a big investment, but it seems like it'd pay off. It seems like everybody'd use them in the Southeast if it would just had something closer.
Well, it depends on how many head you're talking about. You know, these custom guys, the small guys up here where I'm at, they're on a 2 to 6 month back order. If you want a beef processed up here right now, you better have on the calendar 6 months out for these 2 or 3 really good ones.
Well, that's what I'm saying is, like, if a restaurant, let's say you just apply for one restaurant chain and they need 20 carcasses a week or a month or 2 weeks or whatever, but just a large demand. I mean, you can't wait. You can't deal with those small guys if you have to get in line. They need it done now, and we just don't have anybody to do that.
Yeah, it's a tough business with a whole lot of regulation, and it is unpleasant from that standpoint. The labor issues are exceptionally challenging with the regulations. It's not for the faint of heart, and I only know about that much of it.
Gotcha.
Because it's just real tough, and that's what they're going to probably figure out here in this study they're going to release. We've chased a lot of rabbits there. Hopefully they were somewhat beneficial. Any other questions? All right. We'll shift gears to Master Cattleman just for a minute. I do kind of head up how that's organized. It's obviously presented there in a local level. Roger's been on listening and was earlier, and he had a very nice, successful program. They did hay testing for those producers prior to the program. There's some money available, at least right now, to help with getting the agent a probe and having some resources there to help the agent and get some information back for us as well. And it's under a grant that Lawton did, getting a probe for the agent. It's not just for master cattlemen's, but for other things too. It's not necessarily, we can't have enough for every agent in the country, but just for some specific situations and requests, and then trying to figure out, what's our hay look like across the state, more and more all the time. But chase a little bit of a rabbit there. Master Cattlemen's, the host that we have right now is Jasper County, and it'd be Lucy, also working with Charlie Todd, of course, Lucy Ray. And she's got about 65 to 70 folks coming those 8 weeks. First night I was there doing beef quality assurance. It was a great crowd, really nice group of people. She ended up charging $110 for that program and still had 70 folks. So in certain pockets, at least, people still see value in Georgia Master Cattlemen. She actually had to cut some people off because they were wanting to sign up later. They were wanting to do Zoom and all this stuff, and it just got to be too much. So that program in the right place, advertised correctly, can do pretty well, and it's beneficial for those 8 weeks. We are looking for a host, and this is a deal where you would need to get with your PDC and talk with them, because ultimately they have the say. We do need a host for fall of 2020 in Northwest Georgia. To back up just a little bit, in the spring, we already have a host. It's going to be in Ware County in the southeast. So it's in Ware County, the southeast, this spring. And then we start back on the west side of the state again. We'll go to somewhere in Northwest, and then we'll need a host for Southwest. For Master Cattlemen's, maybe the spring of 2021, we'll need a host for Master Cattlemen's down in the Southwest. That's where you need to get with PDC, say, hey, I'd love to do this. I think it'd be a great fit. And you can work with other agents in the adjoining counties. And there's a lot of interest out there for whatever reason right now, and I'm not sure why it has kind of peaked all of a sudden. I had some requests from some young farmers saying, hey, can we do this? And of course, it's done through the agents. So there might even be some other entities that want to work with the agent as well. Any questions about Master Cattlemen? You guys may know a lot about it, and we just want to update you on where we're going to have it hosted and that kind of thing. One little side note is we did a pre and post test for Roger's deal last fall. We did it for Maisha Dowdy in Brooks County in the spring, and those pre and post tests come back very favorable. We have significant impact as far as the pre and post test is concerned. Looks very good. We hope to, we can get our ducks in a row, have a poster put together on that somehow, and then maybe incorporate Lucy's data this session as well. Guys, looks like we're at 10:44, and we can hit on a lot of other things. I would say this just real quick. We've got some new BQA trainers out there. We just had a beef quality assurance train the trainer in Calhoun. It was the only one in the southeast, really almost in the east. So here's the names of the folks that are beef quality assurance trainers now. You've got Holly down there, who's also your herd team agent that kind of heads up the herd team down there. Of course, Brenda Jackson up here. You've got Lucy Ray is also gone through the train the trainer. Maisha Dowdy down in Brooks. You've got Raymond Fitzpatrick up in Northeast. Of course, myself and Carol and Dr. Jones, I say Carol Knight, we're all Big Quality Assurance trained. Those programs, I know they're not necessarily new, but we still have a lot of interest for those. Having them on farms is something we still see some interest in. I'd say that I've had 3, including the Morning Master Cattlemen's, in the last month, which is a decent number. And so there would be a total of 150 folks, roughly speaking, maybe more. And you can do it online for free, but people like this one-on-one interaction still. We can do it for free, and still, I say we can do it for free right now. We can. The books that the NCBA just produced do cost some money, but they are very nice. I'm not sure how far we can get those free books to go, but we can still make it work somehow, some way, to get those beef quality assurance programs for you. They're good, and I love doing them myself. I'm glad that we got some other folks that can do them now too. So that's the basic stuff in terms of programs and things of that nature. If we look in the fall, we look at drought. I know some of you guys got some rain in South Georgia last week. It probably isn't near enough. Looking at the drought issue and that kind of thing is a little more daunting. Looking in the fall for the things that you guys know better than me, the plant side of things on the prussic acid for Johnson grass up in the North Georgia portions. Some of those things, be watching for that first frost here. Who knows when it'll come, but maybe in the next 6 weeks, maybe less, never know. You guys got any questions, anything you want to talk about? Cattle prices are not that great.
Some people think that now is the time to get in. What's your opinion on that?
I would agree, but I mean, I'm just a human. I would say very much so.
Some people say it's not even worth fiddling with them anymore if you can't make any money.
Well, I'd say there's some validity to that too. But the deal is with the cattle business is it's a long-term deal. We had a lot of people get in when it was real expensive. You're all very well aware of that. And guess what? How much money those folks made?
They're still paying it back.
Yeah. So it's a long-term deal. And then when you get in real high, you know the math on that. So now is the time to get in. Again, I'll say it for the third time now, it's a long-term deal. You're not going to start making money till year 5. And I mean, it might be sooner than that, but just being realistic. People also love their hay equipment. They love their tractors, and those things don't pay the bills. You need to have 100 head to really have much hay equipment. And that's unfortunate because we all love doing hay, but it's a hobby. And I know I'm talking real general off the cuff, so don't hate me for that. But
I don't want to be the only one talking. One idea that I have, Jason, and I've talked to some other agents around our area, is doing a junior cattleman program. And we can call it 3-4-H, or we can just call it a program to the youth. Trying to get, and I had some interest from local agents, so basically doing a full program and working with the local producers who's going to say have calves in this early spring. And those kids, we'd have get the calving simulator, and we talk about pulling calves. We do pasture walk class. We'd take those same group of calves that were born and castrate if we need to do that. Work them as we do, kind of like the animals at the herd team. And then take them all the way. It would be a full year, just spaced out classes, and they would eventually, we'd try to get an AI technician, and we'd go through a breeding scenario, and then we'd do a field trip to the sale barn, and so it would be a full year seeing those calves grow from birth to sale, or birth for them to deliver again. And just wanted to let you be aware of that. Hopefully we'll be having some meetings for those agents in this area that were interested to get maybe 5 students from each county and do that.
Yeah, what's your age going to be on that?
We're going to have to go with probably senior, high school age kids.
Yeah, you could probably do middle school, but no lower, obviously. it just depends on if you're wanting to get real hands-on, yeah, it'd be the high school. But if they were just going to kind of be there and involved, yeah, no, that's a great idea. That sounds like
Has anybody done that
worthwhile
before?
deal. What's that?
Has anybody done that before that you know of?
No, not that I know of. I mean, there's probably something similar, but
we all have cattle in our counties, right? And for the ones that potentially are on farm or, daddy hadn't quite taken them under their wing yet and started teaching them much, I just figured if we're going to have a next generation, we got to start looking at the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's great. It's a pretty involved deal. Just a long commitment, and I applaud it for the idea. And so who all's doing this right now?
Stephen Patrick said he'd be interested. Thad, believe said he'd be interested. And I believe Greg Pittman. Greg, did you say you're interested, or you had something else going on? I couldn't recall.
I'm gonna give it all I can.
Yeah.
Just got to have staffing at my office to be able to function.
Yeah, that's what you told me. And basically the way it would break down is if you got 4 agents involved and everybody just plans 2 classes and they're just responsible for just those 2 classes, that's the only commitment they have. You do go at it with 1 agent, and yeah, it'd be heck to plan. But I'm hoping that, we can divide and conquer and have at least just 20 kid maximum in the class and do, say 5 kids from each county or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a concept right now. It may not get off the ground, but when we think about doing programming, I guess I'm getting a little bored with just doing cattlemen's meetings. Just wanted to kind of think outside the box.
Oh yeah. They'd probably that might get your Cattlemen's Association rejuvenated a little bit. And, they tend to wane just a little bit from time to time in places, but you start talking about youth, people get excited.
Well, livestock shows are great, but it's not realistic. I mean, if we're going to talk about the industry, let's show them what the industry is, the ugly and the good and the bad. It's let's don't just show them you can raise this high dollar bull that would never make it in a real yard. I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. My point is just this is a different angle.
Sure. No, I'm with you. And you might see that you got some kids at show that want to do both, and that's where I grew up showing, and it wasn't realistic, but that's how I got involved. A big part of it anyway.
Sure.
Nathan, are you expecting the FFA ag teachers to be cooperative with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it as any kind of direct competition. And again, that's where I'm saying I really don't even know if I'm going to put it off as a 4-H function, because at the end of the day, if a kid comes to that program and they're involved full-fledged in FFA and they're not doing anything with 4-H, I'm not going to gain any kids out of this. If they want to learn about the 4-H program, I'm glad to talk to them about it. But I think it'll be like an adult programming just directed to youth. So yes, I'm hoping to get them on board since they're working with those kids every day and get some referrals.
You may see that you have some adults that want to do the same thing.
Right.
I mean, and I don't think there's any negative with doing that except for just, the division in the ages might get a little interesting. But I mean, I think adults would love to do that, but you never know. People are funny.
Well, you've seen how popular the calving simulator is. I mean, that you thought that, some people never have pulled a calf, and that's about the only practice they're going to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I guess we're wrapping it up. I've got this one picture here. I guess you can see these are some pictures that are come from when I went on a producer visit with Katie Hammond when she was in Dade County. This producer had some cows dying. Can you see the screen, guys, with the picture of hay or no?
Yes.
Okay. And you can see that the cow, the picture of, she's basically a skeleton. It may be hard to visualize it there. Let's see if we can move on down. Yeah, there's what some of them look like. And mycotoxins and that, what they call the hay, he probably paid $30 a bale for that stuff. And he was basically feeding weeds. Well, it was worse. I mean, that's just brush almost. So this is the stuff we battle. People often wonder why I don't know this or that on the top end of things in the world about every single EPD. It's because our biggest problem is just keeping them alive, unfortunately. So appreciate what you guys do out there and battling and fighting the fires. And if you got any questions, fire them at me, or anything you want to bring up like Nathan did about some cool programming or something like that.
Yeah. Good hour of tools. Thank you, Jason.
No, you bet. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jason. It was very interesting. Very good info.
You betcha.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Yeah, y'all too.
Jason, this is Roger. I'm not sure yet when Bill Anderson's coming to the station, so he said today or tomorrow he'll tell me. So I'll try and stay in touch on that.
All right. Sounds good, Bill. Appreciate it.